All right, Paul Manafort's been indicted, former campaign manager of the Trump campaign. And so Mueller indicted him. This is the special counsel, obviously. Mueller indicted him for charges that he laundered more than $18 million in funds from his work for a pro-Russia party in the Ukraine through offshore accounts. So not only was he not registered as an agent of a foreign power, but he was also laundering the money, passing it through. It was him and his and Richard Gates. This is what he's accused of, obviously. You can, as they say, you can indict a ham sandwich. The why you would want to indict a ham sandwich, I don't know, but you can. You can indict anybody. It's just a charge. It doesn't mean he did it. But, you know, this is all arising from remember, there was that raid back in July where they burst into his house with their guns drawn and all this stuff. So it's a big indictment. And obviously, it seems obvious to me anyway, and I've covered a lot of court stuff as a reporter. It's obvious that they are throwing the book at him and hoping that they're going to get more stuff out of him. Now, one assumes that their target is ultimately the president, but who knows? You know, maybe Mueller is just going after him thinking, you know, I want to squeeze this stuff out of you. It doesn't. The thing about it is, though, of course, if you put so much pressure on a guy, he might say anything, right? He might say, "Yeah, I'll give you whatever you want. I'll tell you what do you want me. What do you want to hear?" So it doesn't make him as trustworthy as all that. But it is a big indictment. It's a complicated indictment. It's going to take him a long time to work this out. That means that anyone who hopes the Mueller investigation is going to go away really fast, it is not going to go away. Once the defense starts asking for discovery and this and that, you know, this is going to take a long, long time just before it gets into a court. So the first thing about this that we have to talk about is that Manafort wasn't working for Trump during the time any of this happened. He was working on his own, and he was doing this stuff on his own. So before we get to that, because it's really important, the thing that makes Trump look bad is, why did you hire this guy if he was dirty, if he was, you know, working for these Ukrainian people and all this stuff? And was it to get at some Russian catch of dirt on Hillary Clinton? The most logical thing here, and we don't know this, I mean, this is pure speculation on my part, but the most logical thing is that Manafort helped Reagan get the nomination at his convention. And as you remember, if you think back, the GOP was so panicked about Trump getting the nomination that they started to say, well, at the convention, we're going to do this, and we're going to pull this trick and all this stuff. So he probably pulled Manafort in to rig, you know, make sure the convention didn't get in, as Trump would have said, rigged against him. The minute the convention was done, Manafort was gone. He just tossed him out. So, I mean, it was a bad hire, makes him look bad in that degree, but anything else beyond that, so far, we're not seeing anything. More importantly, what we have to do is, last week, I played some stuff that Tucker Carlson has, and Carlson says he has a source. Now, I've been very suspicious about anonymous sources. I remain suspicious about anonymous sources. I like Tucker Carlson. I think he's been a pretty reliable guy, but he says he's got a good source. And to begin with, he describes what Manafort was doing, and this is essentially what Mueller is accusing him of. So this is cut number 11, right? Yeah.
Media reports describe Paul Manafort as a central figure in the Russia investigation due to the several months he spent as Donald Trump's campaign chairman. According to our source, that's only half true. Manafort is indeed at the center of this investigation, but not because of his ties to Trump. In fact, Paul Manafort spent years working with the Podesta Group on behalf of Russian government interests. That relationship extends back to at least 2011, when our source claims Manafort had dinner in Washington with both Podestas, Tony and John. In the years following, our source says he saw Paul Manafort in the Podesta Group offices, quote, all the time, at least once a month. Manafort was not there to socialize. He was representing Russian business and political interests who sought to influence Capitol Hill, Hillary Clinton's State Department, and the Obama administration. Our source describes Manafort bringing what he called a parade of Russian oligarchs up to the Congress, where they met with members and their staffs. But the central effort to extend Russian influence was focused on the executive branch, the Obama administration. The vehicle through which Paul Manafort worked for the Russians was a shell group called the European Center for a Modern Ukraine. Now, the group supposedly was based in Belgium, but it had no actual offices there. It had, in fact, only 2 employees, both of them based in Ukraine. Their telephone number in Brussels rang in Kiev. It was a sham.
So it was this thing. Basically, he was representing Russian interests, and what was he doing? Paul Manafort was going in and sitting down with Tony Podesta, brother of John Podesta, who was the campaign manager for the Clintons, and was basically setting up ways of reaching the Obama administration, in part so that they could influence the State Department to approve their purchase of our uranium supplies, uranium one. So I don't know. So far, I mean, the media has gone nuts about this, and that's another thing I want to talk about. This is, all weekend long. Last week we learned that Hillary Clinton and the DNC paid for the famous Steele dossier, which was basically a collection of attacks on Donald Trump by Russian agents. That's what it was. It was gathered by a foreign national, an ex-British spy, but he was using information against Donald Trump. Remember the whole prostitute thing and his business interests and all that. All that stuff came from Russian agents, 2 Russian agents. Okay, so we learned last week that this was Hillary Clinton, and Hillary Clinton and the DNC had paid for this, which suddenly didn't matter. All of a sudden we were hearing, that's not a big deal. That's not a big deal. So then this Manafort indictment gets leaked. Now, here's Trey Gowdy. Trey Gowdy was on Chris Wallace talking about the fact that leaking a grand jury indictment is totally illegal.
It is kind of ironic that the people charged with investigating the law and executing the law would violate the law. And make no mistake, disclosing grand jury material is a violation of the law. So as a former prosecutor, I'm disappointed that you and I are having the conversation because somebody violated their oath of secrecy.
Now, obviously, it seems obvious to me that someone, we're going to get to whether Mueller himself is reliable, but someone in this investigation leaked this to CNN for the specific purpose, I think, of getting the Hillary story off the air, of trumping, as it were, the story about the fact that Hillary was colluding. All these charges about Donald Trump, we now know are true of Hillary Clinton. We know they're true of Hillary Clinton, and we know that there are leaks. This is a big deal, this way of leaking things and a way of working with the friendly press. So, and it's not accidental. I mean, this is what they do. This is what they do. Remember when this came out, when it came out about Hillary Clinton, Maggie Haberman, White House correspondent for the New York Times, she comes out and says, they lied. The Clintons lied to me. They lied for over a year about this, meaning she was asking them about this, and she was not running the story because they told her they weren't involved. So the Clinton people told Maggie Haberman of the New York Times that they were not involved with this Steele dossier, and she didn't run the story. And other reporters at the Times were saying the same thing. Now, I'm reading a book by Cheryl Atkinson called The Smear. And this is her second book, and I've read them both. Atkinson was an investigative reporter at CBS, and she left because they kept killing her stories on Obama. She had exposed stuff about Bush. She was just a fair-minded, right-down-the-middle reporter. But when she went after Obama, they killed the stories. And she talks about the fact that while she was investigating the Fast and Furious scandal, the Obama administration, she's suing the Obama administration, the DOJ, for bugging her computer, for going into her computer, planting classified documents so they could smear her, and going through her Fast and Furious files. She has in this book, this is Maggie Haberman, right? Maggie Haberman says the Clintons lied, and she believed them, and so she didn't run this story. This is what Cheryl Atkinson writes about Maggie Haberman. In a January 2015 strategic memo about shaping a public narrative, Clinton officials described then Politico reporter Maggie Haberman as an ideal, friendly journalist willing to generate positive press for the Clinton campaign. Under the title Placing a Story, the memo states, "We feel that it's important to go with what is safe and what has worked in the past. We've had a very good relationship with Maggie Haberman of Politico over the last year. We have had her tee up stories for us before and have never been disappointed. While we should have a larger conversation in the near future about a broader strategy for re-engaging the beat press that covers Clinton, for this we think we can achieve our objective and do the most shaping by going to Maggie." And Cheryl Atkinson writes, it almost makes it sound as if Haberman is on the payroll of the Clinton campaign. My point is that all this stuff, this kind of engineered stuff of the leak of the indictment, and I'm not saying the indictment itself, but the leak of the indictment and the press, running over this leak and saying spending the weekend covering it to obscure the fact that Hillary Clinton has been caught dealing with the Russians to get dirt, paying Russian agents essentially to get dirt on Donald Trump. And when Fox News didn't go for it, the rest of the press attacked Fox News, which is part of the whole thing. We have this. Let's play the Stelter clip. I mean, this is just Stelter. This is just an example of what the press does to demonize Fox News and to demonize anybody who dares to report the truth about the Clintons and the Democrats.
This is a campaign of confusion. It is one of the most important things happening in American politics today. I mean, if you watched the opinion shows on Fox News this week, you might have thought Hillary Clinton was president. Not Trump, Clinton. Here is how the campaign of confusion works. First, the Hill newspaper revived a relatively old story about Russian efforts to gain influence in the American uranium industry during the Obama administration. Fox became fixated on this story, and the messaging was clear. The Russia investigations were recast as a scandal for Clinton and the Dems.
But that was the truth. He's accusing Fox of telling the truth. He is accusing, and Jake Tapper was doing it on Twitter, saying, why are they covering this? Why are they covering HRC? But, that Hillary Clinton colluded with Russian agents to put out dirt during the election and then blame Trump for doing what she had done is, in fact, a bigger story than Paul Manafort evading taxes and doing, all this stuff, which may also involve the Clintons. So this is a concerted thing with the press. This is not accidental. I mean, if you read Cheryl Atkinson's book, you see the way it works is there are these smear merchants who go out and they sell information. They bring information to the friendly reporters, and since most reporters are leftists, they tend to believe the left-wing smear merchants. It's not that there are no right-wing smear merchants. There are plenty of them, but the left-wing reporters don't believe them. They just think, oh, that guy is a right-wing smear merchant, but they believe the left-wing guys. All right, so let's look at, is Mueller reliable? Because the Wall Street Journal, which is in no way a radical newspaper, called on him to resign. They said that because of this dossier, the question is whether the FBI used this dossier to advance their investigation without checking the information in it. So in other words, was the FBI using Russian information to get wiretaps on Paul Manafort or Trump people? And that's a big question. And it says this news means the FBI's role in Russia's election interference must now be investigated, even as the FBI and justice insist that Mr. Mueller's probe prevents them from cooperating with congressional investigators. Mr. Mueller, this is the Wall Street Journal, Mr. Mueller is a former FBI director, and for years he worked closely with Mr. Comey. It is no slur against Mr. Mueller's integrity to say that he lacks the critical distance to conduct a credible probe of the bureau he ran for a dozen years. He could best serve the country by resigning to prevent further political turmoil over that conflict of interest. Well, that's not going to happen. And today there was an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal saying that Trump should just pardon everybody. He should just pardon anybody involved in the Russia, and that would bring it to an end. That's the stupidest advice anybody has ever given anybody. I mean, that would just make Trump look like he's running a gigantic cover-up. However, Trey Gowdy, who, as I say, was on Chris Wallace, he took a totally different tack. He said it's time to let Mueller alone, let him do his job. And he said he's one of the few Republicans left who feels this way. This is cut number 2.
I think Bob Mueller has a really distinguished career of service to our country. I don't think any of your viewers can think of a single thing he did as the FBI director that caused them to have a lack of confidence in him. I think most of your viewers have to be reminded that he actually was the FBI director or that he actually was a U.S. attorney, because he's a pretty apolitical guy. I see the reporting. I see the same thing you're making reference to, that he and Comey are friends. I'm not really sure what the definition of that is. I've got a lot of coworkers that it wouldn't stop me from investigating them or prosecuting them. So they're not family members. They weren't business partners. I would encourage my Republican friends, give the guy a chance to do his job. The result will be known by the facts.
So that's important, because Trey Gowdy is a nemesis. He has been like the Furies to the Clinton. He has hounded them and the Obama administration. All through the Obama administration, he hounded them. Always, I thought, he's the guy who did the Benghazi stuff. He was just their living nightmare. And if he thinks Mueller is clean, that's a pretty good endorsement. So we'll have to keep watching this. All I would say is the things to pay attention to are where the indictments really lead, who is seen to be guilty. and the fact that the press is running a game. The media, when I say the press, I mean CNN, I mean NBC, very specifically, the New York Times, all those guys, they are running a game to make sure that your focus stays on anything that can condemn Trump and maybe endangers his presidency, and keeping it away from anything that really shows that the corruption of the last 8 years, because the Obama administration was one of the most corrupt administrations in American history, and universally, the press came out and said they were scandal-free. Do we have that montage? Let's play that one more time. Remember, as you're watching this, think of Fast and Furious, think of Benghazi, think of the IRS, and now think of the fact that maybe the Obama administration was spying on Donald Trump during the election, and this is what the press had to say about them.
And he's been scandal-free, frankly, in the White House. We haven't had that for a while.
He ran an administration that was largely scandal-free.
There's a White House that takes pride in being scandal-free.
That in the Obama years, which are remarkably scandal-free.
A lot of people were talking about how he's going to be remembered for the scandal-free administration that he ran.
The president has been very rightfully proud of the lack of scandal in his administration so far. There's been no major scandals around top aides.
But President Obama has run an amazingly scandal-free administration, not only he himself, but the people around him. He's chosen people who have been pretty scandal-free.
This has been a scandal-free administration for the last 8 years, and oftentimes people don't even talk about that fact.
It's your media at work, your news media at work. So just remember, as you're watching that, these are the guys who are reporting the news, and they were reporting it from that point of view.